Okay, thank you. Welcome everybody to July 15th Architectural Review Board. Pursuant to the California Governor's Executive Order 92920, this meeting will be held by virtual teleconference only with no physical location. Spoken comments via a computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on Raise Hand. When called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted. Spoken public comments using a smartphone will also be accepted through the Zoom mobile application. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 965-6189-1491. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so that we know you wish to speak. Did we get a call to order? Roll call.
Chair Thompson.
Present.
Vice Chair Lee is absent. Board Member Bolte.
Present.
Board Member Hirsch.
I think you're on mute, Board Member Hirsch.
Present.
Board Member Liu.
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is oral communications. The public may speak on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
Chair Thompson, we do not have any raised hands for oral communication.
Thank you. Our next item is agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
And no changes at this time, although Board Member Vice Chair Lee will be joining us later in the meeting. She's recused from any Stanford items.
Thank you. Our next item is city official reports.
Yes, so Jody Gerhardt, Manager of Current Planning. If we zoom in a little bit here, you'll see that we're having the meeting today, and then the August 5th meeting is canceled, so our next meeting will be August 19th. And that's going to be about the ARB awards. And so maybe we can have a little bit more discussion about that later on in the hearing when Vice Chair Lee joins us. Beyond that, we are going to start to try to come back in person sometime in September. By October, we do need to come back into the chambers. The City Council is going to try that out for us, make sure all the technology works and those sorts of things. So we will learn as we go, but Council will do that first. So I will keep you updated as I can. And then the next page. So here shows August 5th being canceled and then August 9th being the awards. So thank you.
Thank you. Our next item, we'll go into our action items. This one is for 180 El Camino, Real Peloton store facade and signage exception. Recommendation on facade changes and the new signage for Peloton that includes a request for a sign exception for signs that do not comply with the master tenant facade and sign program and the municipal code. So I will hand it over to Sam. Oh, do we have any disclosures?
I'll disclose that I visited the site.
Thank you.
Yeah, I visited the site and looked at the color board at City Hall. I also did additional research into the facade material. And also I did consider a previous project, which was the Tesla dealer at 4180. That one also had a sign exception similar to this one, although it was not a master sign program. That's it.
I visited the site and City Hall board. And I didn't get a chance to read the previous ARB meeting about the adjacent property yet, but I felt that was a good addition to our discussion today.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. I did want to disclose as staff, which I don't normally do, but I did route a staff report to all the board members about Urban Outfitters that was done back in 2011.
Thank you. And I have been away, currently not in the state, but I shop in that area a good amount. I'm pretty familiar with the area. Okay, thank you. I'll hand it over to staff. You're on mute, Sam.
Uh-oh, mute
We,
Sam.
Oh,
we still can't hear you.
Oh, really?
Oh, now
there
we
you
can.
are.
Oh, okay. Okay. You can hear me fine now?
Now we
Uh,
can.
You're
Louder.
just low.
Yeah,
I'm
very
just
low.
Okay. I don't know what's going on with my computer. I have to get that checked out. I
Better.
do apologize. Okay. So with that little fluke, Sam Gutierrez, project planner for the Stanford Shopping Center and for this project. I will be sharing my screen for staff presentation. Give me one moment while I do that. Can everyone see the presentation? Yes, perfect.
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for the confirmation. So as we start here, again, this is 180 El Camino Real, the Stanford Shopping Center. This is for the Peloton facade change and sign exception. Here we could see a rendering of the Peloton facade. To provide some background and context, the project, again, as I mentioned, is located in Stanford Shopping Center, but specifically in the northeastern frontage of the shopping center facing El Camino Real. Note that this isn't directly abutting El Camino Real. There is a large surface parking lot that separates the greater shopping center massing with El Camino, but it is visible as you pass on El Camino. The project seeks to change the existing, this is exiting, but that's existing facade to accommodate the new Peloton tenant. Here you can see it was formerly occupied, or currently I believe they're vacating soon, the Bath and Body Works. And the project includes a sign exception request for additional signage beyond what is allowed. I'll get into that later. For additional background, the shopping center does have a master tenant facade program. Here's a map and the kind of regulations for that program. Everything in green are storefronts that do face a public right-of-way. Again, this is roughly, let's see, the cursor here, and I kind of tried to highlight it. This is roughly the location of the project, and you can see it faces El Camino Real. And if a storefront is greater than 35 feet in length, it does require a board hearing. If it's equal to or less than 35 feet in length, then it requires staff review. This storefront is slightly over 35 feet, so then that's where we come to the board level hearing today. As far as analysis goes in this project does not seek to increase any of the site's FAR, height, lot coverage of the site. Instead, it seeks to change the interior and exterior of the tenant space. So purely cosmetic changes for the most part here. The new exterior facade has 3 design components: stone cladding, metal illuminated entry portal, and an open storefront glazing design. Those are the primary components. The applicant intends to use high quality finishes to reflect the premium products sold by the tenant or the future tenant, Peloton. The facade design appears to be consistent with the master tenant facade program for the shopping center and is consistent with the shopping center's character. Here we could see the rendering that was shown before with the mock-up of the different materials being used, where there's this kind of stone tile cladding that would be used on the upper and kind of outer legs of the facade. Where at the center lower portion, there's this portal feature that is illuminated and does include the Peloton logo, the P logo. And as well, you can see the Blade sign located in this area here to the left. Again, the sign exception that's included in this is to include a second wall sign that consists of the entire portal feature that I just mentioned that features these P logos, the Peloton P logo, at each leg of the portal, which makes it the entire feature a wall sign. So if I could just flip back for a second, because these logos, these corporate logos are incorporated into this feature, it does make the entire feature a wall sign. So a sign exception is needed because the master tenant facade program is being veered from. And not only that, there's some components of just the standard municipal code that would require a sign exception. The process for a sign exception is set forth in our municipal code. And that's required whenever, again, you need some type of exception or almost like a sign variance to vary from the applicable regulations. Here, we want to start with the municipal code regulations, which just cover most of the city, where there isn't a sign program enacted. But just to start as a base here, we could see that it allows for the municipal code allows for several wall signs to be placed on a facade, given that there is an allowable sign square footage area. And here we have a table that roughly works on the area of the wall will now give you a ratio of total area of sign square feet. The subject facade is approximately 936 square feet, and it would allow a maximum of 60 square feet of sign area. And then it does allow for projecting blade signs of up to 3 square feet in area, just for reference, since there is a blade sign, but that blade sign does conform with that requirement. Now, there's a second component here because we do have, again, this tenant space located towards the El Camino frontage. So then the El Camino design guidelines do reduce signage area maximums between 1/2 to 2/3 of the maximum allowed. In this case, it would be between 30 square feet and 40 square feet. And looking specifically at the wall signs, again, the upper Peloton signage with the copy saying Peloton, and then the portal sign together, that they would both be included in that calculated wall area wall sign. And then finally, of course, we have the master tenant facade program that was mentioned. There are regulations for signage here which allow only one wall sign of a maximum height of 24 inches or 2 feet for standard one level of signs. If it's a stack sign that has 2 lines of copy, then it could go up to 36 inches. That's not the case here. And then there is a requirement for 1 blade sign. So in terms of the blade sign, again, it's meeting the requirement. In terms of the wall sign, there's 2 wall signs by the portal turning into a wall sign with the logos being attached to it. So it's not meeting the master tenant facade sign program. That's where the exception comes in. And further here, we could see the breakdown of the sign areas. The blade sign area is approximately 2 square feet. Again, no issue there. The wall sign in the upper facade, the Peloton here, is approximately 23 square feet. And then the portal sign here approximately has 106 square feet of area. So combined, it's already way exceeding the 30 to 40 square feet limitation if we were to look at the municipal code plus the El Camino design guidelines restriction on the sign areas. And of course, the 2 wall signs, as I mentioned, exceed the maximum allowed per the master tenant facade sign program. for the shopping center. So to get into a little detail here about the sign exception findings, we have to make findings to approve. Finding number 1 requires that there's some exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to that property. Of course, the shopping center is one property, so in this case, we would look at the specific tenant, and that those conditions don't apply generally to other tenants in the same area. We didn't find any of those conditions in our analysis of this sign. Other tenants are limited to one wall sign adjacent to them and all over the shopping center. So there was no extraordinary conditions there. Finding number two is granting the application is necessary for preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights of the applicant. We don't want to, unduly remove any, standard property rights or impose any unnecessary hardships on the applicant. But again, denying the request would not remove any of these rights or introduce any hardships, because again, the other tenants in the shopping center are limited to one wall sign in the same situation. This is an interior tenant. This isn't a corner tenant with multiple walls. And then finding number three is that granting the application will not be detrimental and injurious to the property, improvements in the vicinity, or to public health, safety, general welfare, convenience. Denying or granting the sign actually, by exception, would not actually factor into this finding because it is a sign and it wouldn't cause a public safety concern or health and safety concern. So this finding really isn't readily applicable. Now, in looking at the project holistically, again, we couldn't make the findings for the sign exception. So, and with the facade appearing to be consistent with the master tenant facade program and the requirements for ARB findings for material and enhancements of the shopping center, staff's proposed some draft conditions of approval that would require the P logos be removed from the portal entry feature, making it a facade element rather than a sign. So revert it back to an interesting facade entry element and not a sign. And then that condition would make the project fully comply with the master tenant facade program and no longer require the signage exception. And with that, staff recommends that the ARB take the following action. Recommend denial of the requested signage exception to the Director of Planning and Development Services, and recommend approval of the project facade changes and signage to the director based on the findings and subject to the staff's conditions of approval. And that ends staff's presentation.
Thank you. I think next we'll hear from the applicant.
Hi, everyone. Jason Smith, Landshark Development. Again, Chair
Could you
Thompson.
please, sorry, could you state and spell your name for the record?
Yes, it's Jason Smith, JASON SMITH, with Landshark Development.
Thank you. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Again, we are here to present the relocation of the Peloton Stanford Shopping Center. We have with us today Ryan Badger with Peloton to talk about the concept and go over some of the elements, as well as Blake Thompson with the architectural firm representing Peloton. And at this time, I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Ryan to talk about the concept, and we can go then and then follow up with Blake can follow there after. Go ahead, Ryan. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam, Jason. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for your time. I'm Ryan Badger, construction manager for Peloton, and I'm responsible for the development of this project. The signage portal is something that Peloton has developed over a while with our design team. We feel it's a compelling architectural design element that really presents us well to the community during the daytime and the nighttime with its illuminated properties, and feel like the incorporation of our P logos on there just continue to add interest. One of the reasons we chose some of the elements for this facade design. The tile on the upper portion adds some texture, so it's not so monolithic. And on the bottom portion, the entry portal, adds some interest with its varying dimension and the illumination and the P logos. So our design team looked at this extensively, and as much as we could visit the site via Google Earth and Google Maps, we really tried to take a look and be sensitive to the surrounding areas and what would be an attractive addition to the center and present our brand trade dress as attractively as possible. Thanks, everyone.
Hello, everyone. I'm Blake Thomas with Lofty Architectural Group. So in looking at this location, we are hoping that the board can think of the portal as an architectural element as described in Sam's findings. The square footage, we understand the 106 square feet push the findings over the prescribed limit. However, we are hoping that the board can think of the P logos as plaques or secondary signage with only being 2 square feet and take that into consideration. As Ryan discussed, the portal element with its faceted angles really acts as an attractor to street level pedestrians. It pulls customers in. And similarly, the P logos are another form of wayfinding. This location has the Peloton, which is very high, good for attracting cars from across the parking lot. However, the blade sign is the only identifier that this is a Peloton location at eye level as you're walking around the center. That is why our request for having the P logos is an exception to wayfinding opportunity for customers. And that will be all.
All right, thank you. I think we get a chance to hear from the public. See if there are any comments from the public.
Chair Thompson, we don't have any comments from the public.
Thank you. So then I think we can bring it back to the board. Are there any questions of staff or of the applicant from the board?
Yes, Ozma, I have 2 questions at your discretion when I can ask them.
Yeah, I think we're done with the applicant's presentation. So go ahead.
Very well, thank you. My first question has to do with the clearance from the facade to the curb. Is it possible to tell me what the dimension is from the lease line, the structural face of the building to the edge of the curb of the sidewalk? And then how much is it being reduced by with the addition of this new facade? As far as I can tell, it's about 18 inches thick, and the street dives in there with a drop-off area. Sam, either you or the applicant, what is the distance, the width of the sidewalk, basically?
I'd be happy to answer that. Let me pull up our diagram showing the curb condition. Just share my screen. So as you can see here, the addition onto the street level is 1 foot 6.5, so 18.5 inches. And then from there, 11 feet 8 inches to the curb. This is similar to what the existing Bath and Body has also been protruding over the lease line.
And what is the distance, not including the curb cut for ADA access? How much is that going in by 3 feet 4?
3 feet 4, yes.
So that would leave 11, 10, 9, 8 feet 4 inches of real clear space between the two, perhaps.
Yeah, the location of the curb cut to the facade, because it is a faceted portal and arches over to the actual storefront, would be 9 foot 10.
Okay, thank you for answering that question. To Sam, this is regarding the signage and the determination of what is actually a sign. If hypothetically there were no P logos on the framed archway around the entrance, that's then what you'd consider to be an architectural element, not a sign. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what the staff report and the condition to remove those logos was pushing towards. If there's no logos there, then it's a entry feature that happens to be illuminated. There are similar examples of that in other areas of the shopping center. The Samsung storefront, for example, kind of has this entry kind of frame feature, which isn't too far off from this location.
And if that logo itself were, say, moved to the left or the right, away from the frame, and we're just on the facade of the building, the entire facade is not a sign. It's just the area of the logo, 1 or 2 square feet or something. Is that right?
Correct. But when you look at the construction of the portal, it functions almost like a cabinet sign when you look in the details in the plan set. So that's when we made the determination that the entire portal would be the sign because of the way it's constructed.
Okay, so really the determination is one of I won't say subjective, but it's not objectively defined in the code. What is a sign? It's your determination that the portal frame, because of the frame of lighting around it and the bevel and the way it's designed, combined with the logo, is what makes the staff think that's really a sign.
Yes, and I want to be clear that we had this conversation back with the Tesla property, and I think this is what Board Member Liu hopefully looked into. We've had this type of discussion before where we had plastic with punch through letters. It was a very large, plastic Tesla sign. And the whole council decided that the whole entire sign counted, the whole structure of the sign counted. And so we're looking at this one in the same manner.
So I wonder, that's the end of my questions, but I wonder if through the chair you would allow Alex or staff to elaborate on what the issue was with the Tesla dealership. I think that's critical here.
That would be fine. Yes.
That's all. That's the end of my questions, though. Thank you.
Any other questions? Would it be possible to share your findings on the Tesla, or just to show that if it's readily available?
Yeah, I have the staff report up. It was appealed to City Council because I think ARB had originally thought that, this is a similar idea that, just the P logo could be counted. I mean, this was a Tesla logo in this case, could be counted as the sign, sort of put a square around the wording, and that's the sign. However, when you read through the sign code definitions of sign area, it does say, the lettering and the sign structure is counted as the sign. I'd have to probably get a photo of that Tesla sign. I don't know, Sam, if you can pull that up at 4180.
I'm taking a look at it.
Yeah, 4180 El
Just one
Camino.
moment.
And it would be there's a wall sign that's on the building by one of the kind of side entrances. And it was about, 5 some odd feet tall and, a few feet wide. And it was that entire 100 some odd square feet that was ultimately, the director decided should be counted as the sign area, although I think the director had given it an exception, and then it was appealed to council.
And then what was the final determination? Did they have to remove their sign?
That is a very good question.
But Alex, you said you visited it, right?
Yeah, so I was on the board at the time. I don't remember the exact council decision, but the sign is there.
That's what I was thinking, that ultimately the sign exception must have been approved because so the complication is that it was, that there were multiple signs on the site. So it is possible that they built that sign and deleted another sign elsewhere on the property. But I think generally that it was just I think it's just a
generally like a very unwise use of council time, for them to be spending hours on definitions of the sign area. So I think we should factor that in as well on this one, and the council is more conservative than it was back in 2014. But the principle is the same, is what is the definition of a sign versus an architectural element.
I have the street view up if the board wishes to see. Okay, one second.
Yes, please.
I share.
And I'm looking up the minutes as well to see what the ultimate decision was.
And I hope everyone could see the street view. So this is the monument sign at the Tesla dealer location, and then there is a wall sign there as well.
Yeah, if you go on the other side of the building, Sam.
There's another sign.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, there, the red there in the middle. Yeah.
And this does illuminate, if I recall correctly.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
Can somebody elaborate for me, please? The issue here was whether that entire red surface counts as the sign area or just the white logo in the middle of it.
Correct.
And so we're trying to compare that to the situation today where the portal frame would be considered the same as the red area then.
Yes, and with Tesla, the entire red sign was the sign structure and therefore counted towards the sign square footage.
Thank
So I
you.
want to clarify that the red is not illuminated. So that's just metal. So the only thing that's illuminated is just the white logo.
Correct. Correct.
And the rest of it's just metal panel. I mean, it could have been metal siding, right? There's no illumination whatsoever.
Well, and
so there's a little. So
yes.
The Peloton is different because it is illuminated, right? It's got the little LED edge lighting.
Yeah, and I'm trying to find that right now, but that might have been the compromise, is that it was, push through letters originally, and Alex, you're saying it's now a metal backing. That red is metal.
I think that the red was always metal and it was never illuminated. Is my recollection.
The red is not illuminated now, I can confirm that.
Right. Right. And I don't think it was ever proposed to be.
Okay. Any other questions of staff or the applicant? Not seeing any. Okay, so let's bring it back to the board. Who'd like to start? Alex?
Sure. Thank you to the applicant team. I think that the facade is really beautifully designed and really well detailed. I did look into the material a little bit more because the staff report mentioned that it was stone, but the drawings said that it was porcelain tile. So I did want to look into that because I did recall that the master tenant facade program does not allow porcelain tile. But I did look at the material, and it does seem like it's more like a ceramic slab, like a monolithic material. It's not a film or a photograph on a substrate. So I think that is high quality material. I also did look at the glass spec. That also looks really good. So on the sign exception, I think I'm inclined to agree with the staff on this one. It seems like the master tenant facade program sort of wants you to do some sort of graphics on the glass, and I do understand in the report that you guys don't really want to do that, but I think that that's what the with Stanford and Simon's program is pointing you to do. And also, I did mention the Tesla project, mostly because it was really painful for that to be appealed and then to go to council. you know, the council's got a lot of very important issues to deal with right now, and I just don't really want this to go to that, you know, to be appealed and to have to go through that process, especially if you have other options to bring some sort of pedestrian level signage excuse me, to your project. So I will support the staff recommendation and the conditions of approval. And I'm curious to hear what the other board members have to say.
Thank you, Board Member Liu. Board Member Bolton.
Thanks, Chair Thompson. I'm going to come straight to Alex's comments then and try to elaborate on it because I'm a little bit less comfortable, Alex. Really, it's not to do with the sign exception. I don't think there's any grounds for a sign exception here. I think staff is taking that part of it right. To me, it's the determination of whether this portal frame really is a sign. And when I compare this to the Tesla building, for example, one key difference I see is that this portal frame really does serve an architectural purpose. It is a frame to an entrance, and it has a legitimate architectural reason for being there, with or without the P logo. It's an integral part of this design. Whereas in the Tesla building, that red element really was strictly signage. There was no other overriding architectural function for it whatsoever. And to me, that's a key difference, perhaps, when you try to evaluate whether something's a sign or an architectural feature. Here, it's a little bit of both, and maybe we have to weigh whether it's more of a sign or more of an architectural feature. And to me, I find it's more of an architectural feature. It really does clearly frame and identify the entrance to the building. And the logo is just secondary, almost to catch your eye as you're walking by. It's not a dramatic part of it. I would feel better about it, however, if, for example, the lines around the edge of the frame were not illuminated, but just painted white. It would make it easier to say it's an architectural element rather than a sign. Signs tend to be illuminated, architectural features don't. But I'll be very quick to acknowledge that this is a very gray area. And we don't have a whole lot of guidance which is which. But my inclination, if I were sitting in Sam and Jody's chairs, would be to say that the sign is the logo, 2 square feet on each side, and the portal frame is the architectural element. If you make that determination, then there is no need for a sign exception and the whole issue goes away. The question we want to be very careful about is what sort of precedent are we establishing? And that's a very difficult question to answer. I'm also very cognizant of the point Alex is making regarding council's time and how much you want to keep analyzing these things. And so maybe one solution is to ask the applicant themselves how integral this is to their design. If they can just remove that logo and it's more or less okay with them, then I think that's fine to do that and avoid further issues. But that's through the chair. In any case, my basic feeling is that the sign is the logo, not the portal frame. And that's what I would support if the board sees it that way. I would not support, however, phrasing this as a sign exception. I think that's not a good idea. My second thought on this project, and this has to do with noticing the Urban Outfitters project next door, where they have very large elements that project quite a ways over the sidewalk into the right-of-way, is that this is now extending 18 inches into the width of a public sidewalk at a point where it's at its narrowest. I think it's still wide enough, so I'm not too concerned on this design, but it seems to me it's the kind of thing applicants are incentivized to push as much as possible. This portal frame effect could be accomplished by recessing the glass into the building, not projecting everything out from the structural facade. 18 inches is a pretty significant amount to go out. It's 6 or 8 inches more than the current design, which is much more limited in space and scope. And I guess I'm okay with it, but I wish there was some clearer understanding of what is and isn't okay. If somebody else wants to do this now at 3 feet, is that okay? We dealt with this over at the fish restaurant 2 or 3 years back, where they were significantly narrowing the sidewalk and had to establish an 8-foot minimum width on the sidewalk. So given that the sidewalk is wide enough anyway, I don't think it matters here, but I'd like to hear staff's take on that issue as well. Through the chair again, that's not an issue right now. I'm okay with the design as it is today, but it's something I'm pointing out as an issue. So again, to me, I can support classifying strictly the logo as a sign and then allowing this to proceed without an exception. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Hirsch, I wanted to ask you, we have 2 hands raised. Would you want to give your feedback first and hear them afterward, or would you want to hear them first?
Feedback on, excuse me,
On the design?
on this design. Of course, I'd like to speak to it right now.
Okay, I'm gonna let Board Member, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I find that pretty much agree 100% about with Peter's comments, and I would like to add to them, but to reinforce what he's stating here is, with or without the lights, I don't see this element as a single signage element, rather that it is the elements of the logo are effective to simply emphasize the logo itself in an area where you can see it in the front. The blade sign can really only be seen from a distance away, perpendicular to it. So having the logo in these locations, it's a symmetrical entry. It seems like an appropriate design idea, and I don't see it as an entire sign element. And I would agree with Peter that we should be able to treat it that way linguistically or logically. And if we state it, it may never make it to the council as an element if it isn't emphasized. So I can't see that the council itself, and it doesn't scare me to imagine that the council would be reasonable about this if we want to treat it as an exception, and then it gets to the council, I think that they would agree that it's an exception and it isn't an overuse of graphics on the front of the building. I want to add to all of the other Peter comments, except for the one about the sidewalk. I was there, I looked at it. It's a situation I believe it's existing today with the present store. So it isn't an unusual amount of penetration of the sidewalk in terms of handicapped access. I don't see that as a major problem, but I do want to sort of reference the neighboring urban store. It's a very aggressive use of materials and graphics, etc. And in contrast, this is such a simple, pretty thing that I'm really quite intrigued by the detail of it and by the simplicity of it. So there's a kind of a contrast with what I think is overdone on the one side, and this one, which is wonderfully simple and direct. I'm pleased with the detailing of it, and I think it would be quite an attractive entry. I would like to contrast it with what's there right now, because look at the use of the materials and the patterning of what looks like some kind of a towel or whatever the graphics are there on the present store. And how would you have treated that, or how was it treated to be accepted as a kind of a symbolic indication of what is for sale in that building, in that use, in that I find it's incredibly overdone. And actually looking at the number of signs that are on the building today, this is a kind of a simplification. So I'm 100% in agreement with the way it has been presented and would like us to follow through and approve it.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. So I'll give my feedback, and then if Sam and Ryan, if you still want to make a comment, we can discuss after. So in general, I think I see this slightly differently from my colleagues, but maybe also slightly the same. I see it as a sign. That is one big sign, but and I see it as a sign because it's integrated. It's all one big illuminated cabinet. I don't doubt that it's a nice sign. It does a lot of things architecturally that I wish more signs did. So I'm actually in support of the sign as is. I mean, I can kind of see why they might want to have it, the sign master plan is kind of done in a way where like you could remove the sign and still have the architecture stand. And with this case, that's not the case. You can't remove the 2-foot that's etched into the cabinet and still have your portal. You can't do that. So this is one big sign. And if you were to ever like remove it, you'd have to remove the whole portal. And that would be what it is. So in that way, I do see it in the same way that the staff sees it. And the thing that I'm currently thinking right now is that I'm actually okay with the way the sign is designed. Without that whole sign cabinet, you wouldn't get that really nice portal. I disagree with board member Balte. I don't think painting it white would give the same effect. I think the illuminated portal is really nice. So there is a difference there. And I understand the tension, especially the gray area. And so coming into this, I was supporting staff's recommendation of keeping the portal as is and removing the sign to keep this compliant. So in that sense, I could support, what staff says, and that would sort of put sort of split between the board. There's 4 of us right now. But in the same vein, I think I would also be open to keeping it as is, but it is a sign exception in my mind. So that's where we are, at least right now. Sam, did you want to add any notes? I saw you had your hand raised.
Sure. I did just want to follow up on board member Balte's comments, where if we just focused on the area around the logos, then those would be the signs, and there wouldn't be a need for a sign exception. There still would be a need because the master tenant facade sign program only allows 1 wall sign. So if we broke down the portal into the individual logos, we're going to have 3 wall signs in that case: the upper facade Peloton copy, and then the 2 logos. So then we still need a sign exception to get around the master tenant facade sign program. So just wanted to add that to the discussion.
Thank you. And did the applicant, Ryan Badger, want to make any comments?
Yeah, just one thing that might be of interest to board member Balte, as far as the protrusion of the sign cabinet, there's actually a structural header that goes across the storefront of these tenant spaces that kind of pushes any storefront elements out farther to maintain the height of the storefront and the glazing. So, whether it's us or another applicant, that might be why you see some of them push out farther from that storefront lease line. It's because of that structural header. And in regards to the master tenant signage guidelines, we have presented this design to the landlord and do have their support for this facade presentation.
Thank you.
So, Chair, if I may. So I just wanted to clarify that the size of the sign, I think at least from a staff perspective, we do feel like that entire portal is a sign the way that it's constructed all as one piece. And I think we feel supported by the Tesla outcome. It was a consent item. It did ultimately get approved for additional square footage with an exception. So in that case, council was able to support the exception, but with the knowledge that it was a larger sign, including all of the area. So just to put that out there, that's sort of the definition that staff's working off of.
Thank you, Jody. Okay, well, let's bring this back to the board. So I've sort of heard two members in support of keeping the design as is and two others supporting the staff recommendation. But then some sort of mixed opinions on whether we support a sign exception or not. Any more comments in the board?
Yes, Osma, if I could say something here.
Certainly.
It seems to me that the issue the board first should decide perhaps is whether the entire portal is a sign or not. And I think I'm concerned that maybe my opinion is not correct, given what Jody is saying about the council's determination of the Tesla sign. If ultimately the Tesla sign was determined to be a sign, then certainly this is in the same vein as that. Because I'm saying this because there's no way I could support a sign exception for something of this magnitude. I think just looking at the numbers, it is so much larger than what would normally be allowed. 3 wall signs instead of 1 is way beyond what the tenant program allows. And I just couldn't make the findings that you're required to make. I think we have to be able to make those findings, and I can't do that. So the only way I can support this, I think it's a good design, is if that entire portal frame is not a sign, it's an architectural element. And it might be, Osma, that if we just separate the two issues and first see which way the board feels about whether or not it's a sign, and then decide if we want to make it a sign exception or not. That would be a good way to go.
That sounds good. Okay, let's take a little straw poll. So let's go around and hear from everyone if we, let me think about this for a minute. Okay, after thinking about it for a minute, less than a minute, I'm a little loath to go around and ask if everyone believes this is a sign. I think we've been given information. We've been given information from staff and precedents. And so whether we believe it is a sign or not, the information is what it is. We need to decide as a board if we approve the project as recommended by the staff, or if we support an exception. I mean, I'm open to hearing more ideas, maybe from board member Lou and Hirsch, if they feel like it's worth discussing.
Well, I would like to add, I would like to say that on your expressing it as one single element, Osma, I found that to be very persuasive, that it is in fact one single element and works together rather well. The only part that could perhaps be considered in my mind would be that they remove the blade sign and have the entry signs be the two that are the two symbols, which will be seen pretty well from most angles. Certainly you see this really very directly on entering the complex really from street side. You see these smaller elements. You could imagine that you make it a simpler expression by simply eliminating the blade sign. That's a suggestion, not an absolute. And and it seems very important that we consider that the shopping center has accepted this design as well, and that in a way we're playing with a descriptive language here, which in my mind isn't exactly rational, because it is an area that is separately defined with lighting around it, and it is really part of the architecture. The recess is all one thing, and as you described it as being kind of one piece of like cabinet work on the face of this building, is very persuasive to me. I see it as one thing, and I find the elements, those two elements around the doorway, to be useful. It's a symmetrical design treatment, and the symbol is not the name, therefore it's unique that way. And it isn't even, the Tesla sign, for example, was with this rather bold symbol at the same time. And these are very discrete elements and smaller elements, and it fits together as a composition on the face of the building. So I'm quite willing to accept the exception here completely for the very reason that you described it.
Thank you. Any further comments, Board Member Liu? Nope. Any further discussion from the board? Should we make a motion?
David, if you could answer for me then, if you're willing to accept the sign exception, which finding do you use to justify your comments? There's 3 specific things we have to find. What I hear you saying is it's a good design.
Of course.
Which finding has to be a good design?
Of our findings?
Yeah, well, as compared to no undue advantage to other people, and the findings are fairly clear what we have to find.
Yeah, maybe Sam can put up the slide of the findings. And
Yeah,
there's
that'd be
2
good.
slides, unfortunately,
Sure. One moment.
because I think that would be our concern as well. I think, Board Member Hirsch, you were saying sort of, trade the portal sign for the blade sign could potentially be a reasonable precedent, but I do just want to make sure that we're setting a precedent for the entire shopping center and beyond, because I think even if it was just the main wall sign and the portal sign, it would still be over the El Camino guidelines. It would still be over the sign code numbers. So maybe Sam, if you can show that table for a second that has all the square footages.
Sure. Let me, that's actually the previous
Should just be
slide.
back a few pages.
Yes, this one, the previous slide.
Yeah. So just so you can see, the blade sign is 2 square feet in area. The wall sign is the main wall sign at the top is 23 square feet, and the portal sign is 106 square feet. So that's the issue that we're running into. The total sign area as currently proposed is 131. And then the allowed, the standard sign code would be 60 square feet. When you add the El Camino guidelines to that, it's between 30 and 40 square feet. And then you have the Stanford Shopping Center program, which limits to 1 wall sign. So those are the 3 levels of regulations that this project needs to adhere to.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah. So you're asking me to actually say that in this case, I don't consider the portal sign to be the whole element of that recess. As Peter was stating, it's really just the signage itself in that area that should be considered signage. That fact that it is illuminated around it, serves so many different purposes here. It illuminates the front of the building. It draws you into the entry. It's a part of the whole construction. It isn't a sign, and it shouldn't be considered that way. And if our board states it very simply that way, that we consider the signage to be just the elements of signage alone, I think the council should accept it. And in terms of the shopping center as a whole, it is what I've just described. Those elements are the sign elements, not the portal itself.
Sorry, Board Member Hirsch. I just want to clarify, because I thought I heard you say earlier that you felt like the whole portal was the sign because of the cabinet construction.
Well, but this describes the portal sign as being a sign, a separate element, including all of the portal, which is the issue here.
That's right. Yeah, but the whole portal is built like a cabinet. I think that was the point.
The portal is a part of, yes, I agree. It's part of one thing, the whole building, the whole facade. And the signage is separate. I'm suggesting that the signage is simply the elements that are placed on that have symbolic value.
I agree with what David is saying in his logic, and perhaps Ozma, ask yourself if, like the staff suggests, if you remove the logo, it's no longer a sign. How is just adding a logo making this thing a sign, whereas without it, it's an architectural element? I think it's an architectural element any way you cut it. And the signage, the little P logo on the bottom is added to it. It could be a peel and stick label. It could be an additional little box. It could be any number of things. It doesn't make the whole thing a sign. And on the Tesla project, the whole thing was only a sign. That's the only reason it was there. It was glued onto the building. Clearly, this is not. This is an integral part of this design, this illuminated portal frame. And so I think that the logic doesn't hold, especially given staff's determination. If you remove the P, it's no longer a sign. It's just the addition of this small logo. I mean, at what point do we stop? Suppose there's a 3-inch tall letters at the very bottom, made by ABC Manufacturing. Is that now a sign for ABC Manufacturing?
Yeah, really.
At what point do we go back and forth? So what I would like to do, Ozma, if it's okay with you, is make a motion that we direct staff to interpret the sign as strictly the logo, and then process it as an ordinary application. If you're looking for motions, that's what I'd like to try. I don't know if we'll get 3 votes on that or not, but I think that's also, to Alex's point, that's a very clear way to get this project through and not have the question of a sign exception, which is what would likely get brought up to council and waste everybody's time. So maybe we can get that vote through. In any case, that's my take on it.
So I think in that instance, we would still need a sign exception for the number of wall signs.
Well, that brings it back. That brings it back to my question to the client here. Would they be interested in eliminating the blade sign in order to meet the sign? Or would you want to push ahead with the blade sign? I find that the symmetricality is not, it doesn't matter whether you have it or not, actually, to me, from most perspective angles of the front of this building.
Sorry, can I ask Sam to go to the next slide?
Sure.
So I know, Peter, you want to take a motion to see how we all feel about it. If we count just the tiny bit of the sign or the rest of the thing is a sign. I just want to take a note about this, that like the staff is seeing this whole thing as a sign. That's our understanding, is that that's how staff is understanding it. And if I want the rest of the board to look at the slide and see if these could exist for the signage exception findings as well.
Yeah, I've seen this, Ozma, I thought about it. It's not even that hard for me. I just don't think either of these findings are even close. Just nothing special about this property. There's nothing so special about this sign that without that logo, you're going to deprive them of their property rights. I just don't think that's true. There's a very high bar, these 2 findings. I think staff is correct to be concerned that this is a bad precedent to set.
If you'd like to make your motion, Board Member Volta, you can. There are 4 of us here, so.
Well, I'd like to work through your direction, Ozma. I want you to be able to control how you think we can get this through or not through. So I don't want to be pushy about it. I just see that as a way we can get this done.
How does the board feel about staff's recommendations about if we move forward and just remove the P logos?
Well, I had suggested we check with the applicant. How strongly how important is that? That's
We
clear.
can check with them. I'd like to hear from the board what they think. Is that something that the board would find hurts the project or is okay with the project?
Well, it hurts their business opportunity. That's what it does. I think the applicant is the one who knows whether they need eye-level signage as you walk by or not. I don't think it affects the quality of the architecture. It's a great design. It's really elegant, simple, as everybody has said. But I don't know how to judge how important it is to their perceived business success. I know that most businesses there have more than one sign in the form of some sort of a name glued to the glass or small other elements, which is what this logo really is. Again, if you took the logo and just put it on the glass, maybe to staff, would that be considered a wall sign then?
No, on the glass is perfectly allowed.
Yeah.
And that's what Sam had suggested to them.
So they could put this P logo on the glass right inside the portal frame to get the same effect. And so to the applicant, or Ozma, can you ask the applicant that question, please?
Yes,
Sure.
that's the question.
Sure. What does the applicant feel about this possibility?
So we do feel strongly that the P logos on the portal are an important element of this, and you know, we knew coming in front of the board that we would be asking for, you know, either an exception or some other finding. But internally, as a design team for Peloton, we felt strongly that we wanted to you know, ask for consideration from you all.
Ozma, could I follow up on that question?
Okay.
To the applicant, are there other circumstances, other shopping center Peloton stores where you have not put a P logo on the frame and done it some other way instead, to the best of your knowledge?
Not where we've executed the portal element, whether it's been indoor or outdoor, where we've executed the portal, we've had the P logos on those vertical elements.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to make a motion that we approve the project per the conditions of approval in the staff report.
Could you state that again, Ozma, a little clearer?
I'll make an emotion that that will approve the project per the conditions in the staff report, which would mean that we would reject the sign exception and approve the project without the patch signs.
I will second.
Any discussion before we take a vote? Not hearing any. Oh,
Just thinking about it, Ozma, trying to decide if I want to.
Well, I can state right away that I disagree with that determination, and I'm going to vote against it because I believe that the graphics are, as I've described them, the logo itself, and it has nothing to do with the definition of the entryway itself as being a part of the signage. And I don't understand the staff's determination that way because of it being a lit element, or it isn't to me a logical decision, and therefore really we shouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, I think I agree with what you're saying, David. The question is whether we make a substitute motion and see us locked at 2-2, or if there's some middle ground here, because we've got to figure this out. But as it stands now, I cannot support that vote either. So I don't know, Ozma, if you want to withdraw that motion or carry the vote, or you want to try something different. You're locked here, so lead us through this.
No, I do want to try and come to a determination that works for everybody. If we are looking like we might be locked 2-2, then I will withdraw that motion for now.
I would like to make a motion then that we recognize that the signage on this facade is only the logo elements by themselves, and that we consider the square footage of the signage based solely on the graphics and no other element on the facade.
Yeah, okay, David, that still leaves us with the question of three wall signs, not one. Do we also consider this not to be a wall sign then? Because otherwise we still have to make the findings for an exception.
Well, we left it up to them if they would want to remove the blade sign. We haven't really received any answer as to their clients.
You would still need an exception for the 3 wall signs. So it'd be 2 sign exceptions. One for the square footage and one for the number.
There'd be 2 exceptions. One, let me repeat that. There'd be 2 exceptions, one for the blade sign and one for the 2 logos.
No, the blade sign is not really controversial. I think it's the number of wall signs and the area that they take.
Is it possible to get staff to elaborate what the definition of a wall sign is versus a logo on a building? Many storefronts in the shopping center have logos in addition to wall signs, or am I just misunderstanding that?
Sam, can you bring up the slide that has the Stanford program?
Yes. 1 second.
So, and I think the board members are correct that, I mean, the blade sign is categorized differently in the program than wall signs. But at least it's maybe a slightly better precedent if we're, taking away one sign and adding 2 others. We would still need to make the findings for an exception though. So it's a little bit small here, but you have a primary wall sign. And I thought there was a secondary wall sign too.
There is a secondary, but that would be if you're a corner tenant, meaning you have 2 facade walls, similar to the Pacific Catch, Samsung, former Microsoft store, so forth.
That's what the secondary facade means, okay.
Is there a second to Board Member Hirsch's motion?
Not yet, Ozma. I think he hasn't finished making the motion, right, David?
Well, I left it up to the, really up to the owners and the designers as to whether they could live with the idea of only the 2 diagonal signs versus the blade sign. As Jody says, it makes a better sales pitch.
Board Member Hirsch, I'm hearing your motion to have a master sign plan exception for the area and the number of wall signs, and also to remove the blade sign. That's your motion?
I'm sorry, my dog was barking so loud I couldn't hear that.
I'm hearing that the motion is for keeping the wall signs, having an exception to the wall signs, number and square footage, and removing the blade sign. That's what your motion is?
Well, I don't want to make that motion unless there's an agreement from the owners.
I don't want to engage the owners. This is the board that's discussing this. We've gotten all the information we need from them at this point.
You have to hold on a second.
Is there a second? No. I'm not hearing a second.
I think David's motion was not to allow a exception to the area. It was to direct staff to interpret the portal frame as an architectural element and only the logo as signage. That's different from what you just rephrased.
That is a different motion.
I believe that's what David was motioning.
That is what I'm intending.
And my question to David is that that doesn't really solve our problem, because you still have to agree that this is worthy of a sign exception because of the number of signs.
Yes.
And I'm just telling you, David, I can't support a sign exception. We can't make those findings. I don't think any.
But let me ask, could you do that? Could you accept that if in fact they eliminated the blade sign?
No, I don't think the blade sign has anything to do with it. Blade sign is clearly shown on this chart as a separate element. They're allowed to have it. So I don't think it's in our position to rewrite the code. I mean, we have to follow these rules. And unfortunately, the rule says one wall sign, and I don't see anything in here other than that. Could you call this a super graphic, Jody? I mean, is that something we can do? Whatever that means.
Yeah, the super graphics are normally an image, not words and lettering.
Right. It would be a little tough to do that.
Just a little.
Okay.
I don't know. Is there a definition of super graphic?
No, we've been pretty loose with that. I've seen kind of cabinet signs that have illuminated for different tenants in the shopping center. There have, for example, like they're advertising, like, you know, they have their Valentine's Day sale and they have their cabinet. Macy's has some of these cabinets, and you know, they light up, or summer sale and things like that.
Yes,
They
yeah.
change them in and out. So that's one way of doing a super graphic. Another could be an applied feature to the facade. Again, it wouldn't be a sign. It'd be some other type of graphic. I'm not sure if you had, you know, a shoe and you were a shoe store, but that's not the Nike logo, kind of thing.
Let me try an idea then. Sam,
Wait, I'm gonna,
Let me,
Sorry.
can I just chime in here for a second? Because
No.
suppose we considered what the Ozma was saying in the very beginning. This is really one thing. And the signage is the elements within it that have to be a certain size. So if in fact the sizes are appropriate, we accept it as a single element with a signage piece of it being a square footage limitation.
it sounds like we would still need to grant that signage exception, as you say. So regarding your original motion, I didn't hear a second, so I think that motion didn't get a second, so we'll let it go. I know.
I'm sorry, Esma, go ahead.
I'd like to restate my original motion that was seconded by Board Member Liu, and just see how it goes. So I'll move that we approve the project per the conditions in the staff approval.
Great, I will second.
Can you tell me, Esma, how that is separate from the motion you already previously made?
It's not separate. It's going to
Yes,
be the same one that I originally made.
Okay, hold your vote.
Okay, let's get a vote.
Board Member Bolte,
No?
Board Member Hirsch,
No,
Board Member Liu,
Yes,
Chair Thompson,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee is absent. The motion does not carry.
Okay, Ozma, can I follow through a separate thought then, please?
Yes.
Okay, to the staff, we had a project on, I think it was the North Face storefront, where they had a large logo of a topography map above the facade. And I believe we interpreted that as a super graphic. Is that right?
I believe that's true as well.
Yeah. So what if we considered the portal frame to be a super graphic? And then we don't have to worry about the counting of a wall sign. It's not a wall sign, it's a super graphic. And we can say that and just leave it at that.
The super graphics don't normally have words on them or letters or things of that nature. If it was a bicycle, maybe it's not a P, maybe it's a Peloton bike.
Right.
You'd have to.
That was my example earlier. Like if you were a shoe store, let's say Nike, it wouldn't be the Nike logo or the Nike copy, but they could certainly have a shoe because it has, even though it's related to them, it's not a part of their corporate signage, if you will.
Well, you certainly could say it has that quality of being bike-like. So that seems like a reasonable direction for everybody here.
Sam, just the other day, we were looking at the Macy's store, which has a number of wall signs. Is that just because of the size of the building that's allowed? I mean, how is it that you're only allowed one wall sign? It just seems so restrictive.
Size of store.
Yes, and the Macy's went through an exception process as well, and the Macy's is an anchor tenant, which always goes to the board because it is such a significant building. It's so prominent, and in that case, there's 4 sides to it. Though one side of the facade did receive 2, but it had to do with how you find that building because it is so large. So, for example, the northeast side of that building, which has walkways from the Sandhill end of the shopping center, if you didn't have multiple signs there, you wouldn't know where that Macy's building is because then there would be a one wall sign and 2 walkways heading towards it. So actually a part of that discussion was adjusting those wall signs so you could correctly see down those walkways as you enter the shopping center where that building is. So the signage on the Macy's building, because it is one whole tenant, actually aligns with your lines of sight as you enter into the shopping center to find that building. If you only had 1 or 2 wall signs, then you'd have 2 other sides of that whole building that you wouldn't know what that building is. Granted, Macy's has been there for a long time, so anybody who's visited the shopping center knows what it is, but anyone new wouldn't be able to understand that. So it is a bit of a different situation because that is its own building by itself, not touching the rest of the shopping center massing. Where this is an interior tenant space with only one facade. So it is a little unusual to have multiple signs, wall signs.
I have a question for Board Member Belton and Board Member Hirsch. What is the cutout in the facade doing architecturally that a decal on the wall, on the glass, wouldn't also accomplish?
Well,
yeah, I used to see your point, Cosmo.
your point, yes, it's sort of clear. Yeah, there are many ways in which you could etch the glass or whatever that would could be appropriate as well.
David, I'm torn here because I can't support any kind of sign exception for this project. And so even if we can push staff to change the determination of the sign, it doesn't really get us where we want to be. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yes, we're sort of between a rock and a hard place.
So I don't know, maybe it's best just to push it through. I mean, to Alex's initial comment, however, this is going to give the applicant all the reason in the world to try to get an appeal going on this, which is not really helping anybody.
Yeah.
Alex, do you have any thoughts? I mean, you sort of brought that issue up, wanting to make a clean decision that's not going to get debated endlessly through our town.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else that I can add to this one. If you guys wanted to go through definitions of different types of signs, I would think you should look, I would look at, I guess, I think it'd be like a canopy sign, right? because you're talking about a portal, so like a portal, like canopy signs are usually put on like awnings or something. So I would argue maybe that you would consider it as a canopy, you know, as part of the entrance. It's an entrance element.
Is there a definition someplace we can hang that on?
Well, in the master sign program, right, there is an element for canopy signs. Here, I've got it's in the page 2F of our packet.
Page
Have you framed decorative and/or decorative structures over entrances? Tenants may elect to use the canopy sign as their primary storefront sign. The sign shall conform to the acceptable primary sign types as indicated above.
So
They have to get rid of their big sign if they did that, though.
Sam, to go back to the Macy's example, there are wall signs and then there are canopy signs on Macy's as well. From the larger plaza, I believe there's a sign over the doorway, a Macy's sign on the doorway, I believe.
I think, Sam, if we can just pull up that table,
Sure. 1 second.
it does look like a canopy sign is an optional one sign on a primary facade.
And they'd have to get rid of their big wall sign, right?
Does it say that, Sam?
It says it's the primary storefront sign.
On the primary facade.
This is under like 2F, yeah, it says like tenants may elect to use the canopy sign as their primary storefront sign.
Oh,
Optional is an thing that they can elect to do in lieu of a wall sign.
in lieu of a wall sign.
Yeah, I don't know if our
that doesn't help.
applicant would be okay with that. Especially given that there isn't really a canopy element in this facade.
Right. We'd have to designate the portal as a canopy.
I don't know that that works.
Yeah.
in design.
Oh, I see, canopy sign. And you're only allowed one of those.
Only one. I think it's better to actually agree to cave in, Peter, and agree with our cohorts.
Okay, Osmo, make your motion again.
Okay, I will move again that we approve the building or approve the project for the conditions in the staff. That is escaping me. The conditions of approval in the staff report.
Great. I will second.
Can we get a vote?
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Don't smirk, Osmo.
Chair Thompson,
Your face.
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee is absent. The motion carries 4-0.
I was doing a sad face. Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, staff and the applicants. And see that we debate these things very heavily. And it will be beautiful.
Too bad. Sorry about that.
Okay. Should we, are you able to contact Vice Chair Lee? See if she can join us. Maybe let's take a 5-minute break and resume at 10:05. Thank you. Okay. I guess we can should we just go ahead and start doing the draft of the architectural review board meeting minutes approval while we're waiting for her. Let's do
Maybe.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do that. The first item is the meeting minutes for May 6th. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Move that we approve the meetings, the notes from the meeting of the 6th.
there a
Sure,
second?
I'll second. Yeah, I'll
Okay,
second.
we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from May 6th by Board Member Bolte, seconded by Board Member Liu. Can we get a vote?
Before I do the vote, I just want to state for the record that Vice Chair Lee has entered the meeting. Board Member Bolte,
Yes?
Board Member Hirsch,
I was muted, Sarah. Yes.
Vice Chair Lee.
Since I just joined, I'll just abstain.
Okay. Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes,
Okay, the motion carries 401.
thank you. Okay, the next item is the meeting minutes from June 17th. Anybody like to make a motion?
Before that, Osmo, can I ask a question of staff? These notes seem to be of a different format. Jody, can you say, how are they put together?
Yes, so Vin, is this our new, because we do have now the handbook from City Council that asked for summary minutes. And so
Right.
Vin, is this our first one that's done in summary form?
It is, yes, and the transcriptionist would love to get some feedback if you guys have any.
I was asking you, who summarizes them and how is that done?
It's done by the transcriptionist. And so that's why the transcriptionist is asking for comments of how do we want this summarized? Is this an appropriate length? Do we want more or less? Those sorts of things would be good comments.
And Jody, can you clarify for me, does any member of your staff review this as well?
Vin and I do take a quick glance at it, but we do not have the staff hours and manpower to do much more than a glance.
I see, okay.
I think, JD, I thought that the summary minutes were done well. We've done them in the past where it was just one paragraph. And I always felt that those were too short. It seems to me like we might be able to get them even shorter, maybe down to a couple pages, but I think it's a good start.
Yes, I support Alex's comments. I think this is pretty well done.
Any comments from Board Member Hirsch or Vice Chair Lee?
I was quite surprised to see it in this format. Recall actually that we did want to simplify the process, and was concerned that there might be some loss in detail. And I wondered if in your review, maybe having been at the meeting, it might be worth having a close look at it in order to make sure the detail is somehow satisfied. Somewhat of a reservation about the process. That's all. But I think it's better not to have it the way we've had it in the past, and that this is an improvement.
I'll say I support the format.
My notes are that I think the format is good. The only maybe reservations that I have of it is I think it'll require us to look at it much closer just in case there's any misinterpretation of what we've said. Up until now, we've had meeting minutes that just transcribe verbatim what we've said. And so there's no, maybe with the exception of a few typos here and there, maybe something was misheard. The chances of anything getting misinterpreted was a lot lower. And I feel like with this format, it's a little bit higher because we have someone who's interpreting what we've said and adding verbs like this person clarified, this person said, this person agreed, this person disagreed. And so those are my only reservations with this format. But I will have no problem approving the minutes today.
Yes, when I mentioned detail, I meant intent, just as you mentioned here. So I think it's correct that it's up to us to now go back and make sure that it does in fact describe what our intent was.
So I don't know how much you want to go on this, Ozma, but I think it's fair to address Alex's comment that could this be done more quickly, more condensed? And I'm not sure, Alex, how much middle ground there is between a summary paragraph and what this is, which is just a distillation of the verbatim minutes into a one-sentence piece, without really running the risk of judgment calls on what was or wasn't important. So I think I support the way this is done as a good middle ground between a verbatim transcript and a summary paragraph. So I like this the way it is, actually.
Are there any more thoughts from other board members on that comment from board member Liu about making it even more brief?
I agree that that it's properly done the way it is present. In length, in terms of the length or the detail, the length is fine. It's just as mentioned, the intent is really important. So we should look at it ourselves, but the length of it is appropriate.
I'll move that we accept the minutes as presented.
I second that.
Sorry, I thought I saw Vice Chair Lee was about to say something. Just want to make sure we get a chance to hear from her.
I was simply just going to add that this is the right forum where we could always bring up a comment that, you know, there was some disagreement on the minutes per our review. So I'm happy to move forward.
And then I'll also state that I could, having considered board member Liu's comment a little bit more, I think more brief could actually be good too. The benefit of having the summary is that some of the deadwood gets taken out. And it seems like in this format, it's still all there, but just summarized instead of noted verbatim. But we have a motion and we have a second. So let's do a vote.
Board Member Bolte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Vice Chair Lee,
Yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
The motion carries 5-0.
So board, if I may, I just want, with that motion, you know, approving these minutes, I think I heard most of you in agreement, but I just want to make sure that we're generally okay with this length and depth and those sorts of things. That's what I hear from the motion, correct?
Yeah, I think we had 2 board members that said it could be shorter and 3 that agreed with the current length.
Okay, so maybe we can leave the transcriptionist with that, you know, this is generally a good length, but if they think they can shorten it by a little bit, that would be okay too. Thank you.
Ozma said if you can cut out dead wood.
Yes, that's the way I would look at it too.
But
Yeah.
We'll see if the transcriptionist knows what deadwood is, but.
Someone just says, if you say I agree, and you know you have 5 agreement or 4 other agreements, you know you don't need. You can say all agreed. And get
There
rid
we
of
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I learned that term in English class, but it's just like the extra stuff that adds, like, doesn't necessarily add to the point, but just kind of part of it, extra stuff. Okay. All right, our last item is board member questions, comments, and announcements. So we have NVCAP on here.
So the council is off this month, so nothing's happening. It's in the report at the moment. I think board members may have seen in the news that there's another housing project proposed in the area on Lambert. So that's going to be coming to the council as a pre-screening through the planning community process. And so that's condominiums and low-income apartments combined together in one project. And that's all that I've got on that one.
Thanks for the update.
Osma, I have a comment or a question.
Sure.
The minutes from May 6 pointed out that a member of the public had raised a question about the color of the painting on the Caltrain poles as it goes through downtown. We had agreed on May 6 that you would put this item on the agenda. I haven't seen it yet. Do we need to push harder on that?
That's right.
So
yes.
I don't know that I caught that was supposed to be on the agenda. I can, I will follow the will of the ARB. I think we've already had discussions with Caltrain though, unfortunately, but we can always discuss it again.
I think the issue, Jody, was a member of the public had questioned whether the poles were painted as we approved or something like that.
They were painted as approved.
And the public person had put a number of photos out that raised the question. And at least two of us, I'm just looking at the minutes, had asked Chair Thompson to agendize this question. And I don't think we wanted to reopen the discussion necessarily, but it seemed that it at least merited our attention. We shouldn't just ignore this person's question. So I was hoping the chair would at least find a way to do something about it, let this person know, or at least just have the chair formally contact this person and let them know it was done as we agreed. I think it's a mistake to just ignore public comment when somebody raises an issue.
My understanding was that somebody from staff, maybe it was Amy French, emailed this member of the public and addressed concerns. And so I think maybe that's why I thought that item had already been addressed by staff. Maybe we can take a straw poll here if we feel like it's important to bring out. I'd like to understand better that, and maybe this is something we can discuss if we decide to do this, is what options and what motions we could do to address this person and discuss their needs.
To expand upon this a little bit, is the question of the color of the pole, because it was sticking out within the landscape, right, as a color that was inappropriate in the landscape. This question really is this pole within the area of a station? And was our determination of the color of the pole based on that ones that are within the station because we chose a specific color for historic reasons, in a sense, that they matched up with the station color? And this pole actually stood out within the green landscape as being a jarring element. So the research has to be done to see how did we determine the color of the pole, and was it exclusively in stations or was it in the Palo Alto area in general?
So I do want to be a little bit careful. We haven't agendized this item quite yet, but I believe I can just present facts. And the facts are that we did approve tan poles at that particular station, and the rest of the city would have green poles. Now, if you're looking at that pole from the station itself, then it sort of blends in with the station. This particular resident has a different vantage point, and so that's why it seems like it's sticking out. But it is a pole at a station that matches the color of the station. Those are just, straight facts. If we want to discuss it more, I can certainly put it on an agenda. And I can also, I believe we got back to the resident, but I'm not finding that right off, so I can make sure about that too.
Well, that certainly clarifies it, doesn't it?
Would the board like to agendize this just to discuss it further?
No, I don't, at the risk of discussing the issue, I don't think it warrants further discussion. I was annoyed that this person put out 2 fairly well-written, intense emails asking for a response and basically got nothing from anybody, the board members or the staff. And so I finally responded to the guy, come to a meeting and present an issue. I didn't want to go beyond that. And I guess I feel that somebody has to respond to public comment like this. It's a legitimate question. And I bet the guy is still fuming, talking to his neighbors, saying, I asked something and the city doesn't work, I don't get an answer. I understand that staff has got a lot on their plate and we're just doing our own volunteer part here, but somebody has to answer these kind of things.
My understanding was that an answer was provided and that it was provided on the staff side and that we were not CC'd.
I guess I'd feel great if staff could then at one point in one of our meetings, just tell us what happened. It doesn't have to be an agendized discussion, but just put it out in the record. Here's what we did.
Yes, I second that.
Yeah, I don't think the issue itself warrants discussion. I looked into it myself, but that's not what we can discuss right now.
Okay.
This is to the chair. You run it, Osmo. That's just so you want to hear my feedback on it.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'd like to raise a question of personal privilege here. I have the same, not the same kind of feeling, but I have a feeling that something is slipping out from underneath us here. And that's a windup of the objective standards. My sense is that, and I speak for myself particularly, that at the end of the review of objective standards, I wrote a rather detailed letter and haven't received any kind of response to it. It even mentions issues of legal issues, which I had researched, which determined that it isn't possible to write objective standards which are not completely known before a person submits a project. So in the objective standards, one item is that the chairman has the right to make a final decision on certain elements within a proposal that are or not one way or another. I think this doesn't actually follow the law properly. So I would like to request that this be agendized for the next meeting and that we look at both my final letter, summary letter, and Ozma had comments as well at the end, which were sort of open questions and concern for, and you speak for yourself, Ozma, about this, but just to repeat what I read as your intention is that you're not 100% happy with the way it has been resolved from our point of view as reviewers. I think we need to have another meeting on the issues, and I'm requesting that here. In fact, I'll make it as a motion. I move that we keep the item open and open to discussion by the whole board to review our last comments, both on the graphics and the intent of the objective standards.
Okay. So just to clarify that in my email, I'm sorry I didn't get back to you, Board Member Hirsch. My intention with that email was not to reopen any items. The open questions that I had written in that email were things I still want to discuss, and I was going to bring that up here as part of the ARB retreat. And there are questions that don't just apply to objective standards, they apply to architecture in Palo Alto as a whole. It's more conceptual stuff. I don't know that we can reopen the objective standards at this point.
I was just
No, I
gonna-
think the ARB has made a motion to approve the objective standards. So yeah, that needs to continue to move forward. We do have there was the graphics that the subcommittee is still working on. I'm waiting for graphics from the consultant. So there's nothing to look at right this second. But we are trying to get that finished up before we go back to council on August 16th. So that part of objective standards is moving forward. We really need to get something on the books. Just generally, as far as objective standards goes, if we don't let this carry through, then the city of Palo Alto has no standards. And we're going to get SB 35 projects that come through, conform to our code, and you have no design control. So I want to be very clear about that. I'm happy to have lots of discussions, and I'm sorry, I take the blame too for not calling you back, David. And we can continue that conversation, but I think we need to let phase one play out, phase one of objective standards, let it play out. If we want to come back and talk about a phase two or, any of that, happy to do that. But be very clear that if we don't do this, we have we have very little standards. We would have height and setback and, not much more.
Jody and Ozma, did you want to report back on the planning commission hearing and just what the procedural or structural plan is for objective standards, so we understand the context of how it's moving post our discussion?
Yes, so related to planning commission, they did make a motion, and I'm trying to find my notes. They did make a motion to approve the project, send it on to council. There was a fair amount of discussion about height transition. So in the city zoning code, there is, a maximum height. Many times it's 50 feet. And then there is a lower height limit when you're next to lower density. So if you're next to R1, maybe you can only be 35 feet tall. It is that code requirement, that development standard is expressed at least 11 different ways in the code. And so as part of this objective standards project, we're trying to clean that up. There was a lot of misunderstanding amongst some residents that they felt like we were trying to change the code, do more. They felt like we were doing more than clarifying, that we were actually changing the code. However, I think a lot of the residents were in an RM40 type development where usually this lower height limit doesn't apply. And so I think just more conversation around all of that is going to happen at a community meeting on Monday at 6:30. We will have that community meeting. I've sent out invites to anyone who participated in that planning commission meeting, who commented on that planning commission. I've sent it out to all of the architects. We had sort of a group of architects that we were engaging in this objective standards project. And I also sent it to Sherry Furman, who seems to be, one of the main people at PAN. So she was getting the word out to others. And I have heard from, other people downtown and things like that. So the word is definitely getting out about that community meeting. So we'll have that height discussion. But that was the main issue that came out of Planning Commission. The Planning Commission very much respected, the ARB as far as all the work that went into the objective design standards, that 1824 section. So they appreciated your work on that.
Do we have a retreat scheduled at some point? It seems to me David's issue is better addressed through a ARB retreat than an agendized item. This is just to the chair.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up a retreat. So we are meeting on the, I guess, August 19th
19th.
to discuss the ARB awards. And I wanted to bring up with this team here to see if the team or the board would be open to doing that in person as an ARB retreat item.
Yes, I felt pretty strongly that that would be a good item to bring up at the retreat.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads.
Sounds like a good idea to me, yeah.
That would be
David, are
great.
you happy with that if we don't try to agendize this concern, but rather discuss it at a retreat?
Yes, I think that's good.
Jody's concerns should be very seriously taken. It's a real issue.
There's so for the retreat, I think we can have topics that we're going to discuss. Part of the email that David is referencing is I sort of started thinking about these questions that are more conceptual that I thought it might be really rich to discuss in person as a board in a retreat format about architecture in Palo Alto as a whole. And so that was another item I was thinking we could discuss at the retreat if the board is open to that. So Jody, in terms of logistics, oh, sorry, Vice Chair Lee, were you going to say something?
Oh, sorry. I just was going to ask, since we're not meeting on August 5th, is what I understand. And I just was wondering, how do we find out some summary of what was discussed at the community meeting on July 19th? Is that okay to talk about at the retreat, or I'm not, maybe the city's going to have some summary from that discussion. I'm not sure how that's best handled.
Yeah, I will find out how we can do that. If I can probably just, if I can send you an email. I can definitely send you an email, and then we can see, does that email also need to be public, or I can make sure about that. So I will send you, it'll be, the community meeting is Monday. And so I'll just, to be careful, I'll say by the end of next week, I'll send out such an email.
Thank you, Jody. We just weren't aware of the community meeting. I didn't receive any notice of that meeting. I'm just wondering how it was publicized. Maybe it's just an email invite only.
It was email invite only because it was supposed to be focused,
Like a
the
focus group,
PTC,
yeah.
it was focused on the members of the public that had a concern at the PTC.
Yeah.
So, I did open it up to anyone that had commented, including the architects group. And the ARB can attend. We always have to be careful about quorum, but if you're just listening, there isn't, really a quorum issue there.
I just appreciate your summary. Thank you.
And the council is meeting to discuss this on a date certain as well, right?
Yes, council is going to be discussing objective standards on August 16th. And so we would, appreciate Osma, probably you as chair, unless you designate someone else to be present for that meeting. The same as you were for PTC.
Yeah, I have that on my calendar. Okay, any other last comments, announcements, or questions? So we'll stay in touch with the board on where we'll do the retreat. Sorry, go ahead,
Yeah,
Jody.
can we just, so the retreat, staff can set up a location. Two possible locations is we have some larger conference rooms in City Hall. We also have the Art Center. We can see if one of their conference rooms is available. I don't know if the board has a preference.
Recanado Library has a beautiful room as well.
Where would you prefer we start looking?
Didn't we do it at the Recanata Library last time?
We were at the Art
I believe it was at the Art Center last time.
Art
At
Center.
the Art Center.
For what it's worth, I prefer downtown. What is it?
Personal reason,
It's
closer.
what I prefer. We have a choice, Chair Thompson.
I think we're open. I think we're open either way. I don't have a real preference myself.
Okay,
I
we'll
would
let
say-
Vin see what the best room he can find.
See what's available.
And then as far as agendas for the meeting, the retreat, would you like me to I'll bring back the information about the Caltrain poll, just to make sure, you know, that someone got back to the person. And then I'll email you a summary of the community meeting, but we can go over that again as well. And then David's email and also your email related to objective standards, we could review. And I think maybe you were thinking that turns into a larger architectural discussion.
It can help us discuss the ARB awards as well.
Yes, and actually, yes, we do need to get the ARB awards started.
Could you discuss the schedule on the ARB awards? So when would be, you know, when do we make that determination and how?
We can probably
We've
discuss it
blown
when
past,
we meet.
yeah, we've blown past the schedule because of the pandemic.
Well, it's a whole year, right, later, but still, what it would be when? The first in December or January that the awards are given?
I don't have that answer at the top of my head. I mean, I think I don't know that that's codified though. So I think we have some ability to move that
Choose.
around as we desire.
I think we
But
can
it-
discuss it more on the day as well. Okay, and then I guess we'll set aside just that morning, right? We'll try to finish at noon again.
Yes.
Sounds good. All right. There's nothing else. Thank you, everybody. This meeting is adjourned.